Before we start, I wanted to let you know that this is going to be our last televised updates for a few weeks. The spring sitting of the Legislative Assembly starts next week. So we are working out a schedule with media to be able to update you, but we have regular updates online, social media, website, premieres on radio several times a week. So there'll be lots and lots of information and updates available. Today we have a pretty full house. We have Premier up first, followed by Minister Kusugak and then Dr. Patterson. We also have the Minister of Education and the Minister of Economic Development and Transportation here to answer your questions. So let's get right into it.
Ublumi atau hitna nuban nalwa nutak ta nakuwena atau hitna umat 11 nuban nalwa kaunir tut mami himalak tut katiluk ta lugi 45 nguyuman na nuban nalwa kaktu nunubu ilwani 44 akalugni atau kingain amman 197 daimang nuban nalwa akalugnu law kamata mami himalak tut ana unir tut Nunavut mute Nuvan Nayra Tari Kutimi Kapia Himayu Hibul Lapami 16,918 Makingulani Kapia Himayu Nuvan Nayra Tari Kutimi 13,906 Ovena Kunitakwa Kobakpala Yamata Kapia Himayu Okain Hoktunga Kapia Himang in the Rovit Kapia Yatoma Putit government utakwa ikayowa hongman ama ikayoho apta tana nutango yo haknya lakta buta ikayuti ay himagya haktunu anitte diga haktunu bl 14 no tabani nunabu ilwani ay himakoyot ay himakoyat yabutakwa ay tolo lang imata nuban yarami tana nunabun mi ulukta mutoga ngayo takwa ikayuta uniat ay himagya haktunu bl 14 no neki amma takwa nakhaung ituluni piyaga kallarik tungit piyaga kallarik tu takwa anit tailiyun takwa ilulakak tako may kayutit perok tuni neke immogalung ni neke huin nako huito ila iguna huito akaroyat amma ayung ikangap takwa inu inaking itaw tayo pata ilaw yuluin amma ilangit nakimi timingi nama kaktangi patah takwa to nama giyani piyulu ayakto nakimut nakini amma huna mea nakaung itu galu piyaga kalarik ni takwa to ilaw yulu akuma tana pigelaw to taban yakalung ni tana ikayut government kuni May 14 amma ikpakamutikid lugu 116 takwa igdorya tuniyaw himalak to ikayut ni nakini amma nakayong ito ni Taan ikayut toka ngayok ama pigwak pata angyak tau niat takwa anya taili titsikut kawi hahumata anit tailiga kadla takuna anit taili tam ukaluk suta kawi hahumata takwa kawi hak tau anit tailiut ayung itu takuminga nakita kumi tahikwa tabunga uktoa tut ukaluk viuk pata ukakomat piwang mata saya kunga nuvan nariwak tari kutimu 18800 mut ukaluk tangilo tan nali COVID hotline tan 188 number nguyok toanga mat nuvan nariwak aktunut amma nuvan nariwak aktunut kawi hakta waktunut tay kunga nakita ko tay kunga ukalung ilutit tan ublutamat piyak kawyok Ublaku 9 mi pigar lagu unnu kamun 8 mi pigar lagu takwa tu kirautit ukwinganian amma nuvu nut khawe hupunga takwa amma khawe naksuni takwa nuvan nariwak tu ami hung yakpad le mata takwa nuvan nariwak harun yaktut na haut angina khawad le malaksuni tana khawe naktu ya kayu hu yaktatia tabani kalung nilo ya tabani na hautit man na yok mai che yu mata ublu ata ublu mi ata hit na ulau managda ki heni pilere kabut planning ito ta bunga huli akol tatakwa anna reality ku malik taw ko yung maliga kakap ti ku malik chalaw labut takwa kating atang iluta Imerear tolo takuwe hugar tolo ta Iqaluit kanang mutakwa pingi diku kapdunatu parties takwa te apakoyaw nginapta Victor Himaluta kanigilwa tangiluta maanalo yatana hanan naulang iman amaman demita hanan naulang iman ujjatu chelauta katinga tangiluta naala chaluge malit chaluge takwa anya tailiti chikut malikta koyangin amma Nunavut miut anigakop ta Iqaluit tini kinapa mi matwa mi atiluta ay himaluta ublaluk tangiluta agabuer mi charlugit kanigilwa tangiluta takwa to hangulak ta udang lengulak kehenita ko malit charop ti kehenita nuvon nariwa amihung ina khawnya mata takwa nuvon nariwa khaktut amata na ihulagata luningul lunitamani amatay kwa Nunavut miu nala cha taktut ko yali yunga nala cha tapi mat na khemayunga ko we hokati gapi takwa nuvan na ya kaktu na hauti mikliban le yang mata ino katip tini lap tini pakan na tin kamagi charlugit pit charlugit nagligit charlugit ko we huk parlu ta pinya pugut hanan na ngilang mat ngunya mat takay khechang na pugut Iqaluit na mata nanunang iman amihu yuit kawi hatchalo hinunami hila huinaw kanagakakman kuwe hugluta nokangat charluta pinyapago mat now yuhim. Today we are reporting 1 new case and 11 recoveries of COVID-19. There are 45 active cases in the territory, 44 in Iqaluit and 1 in Iqaluit. There has been 197 recoveries to date since this outbreak started. So far, 16,918 Nunavut miut have received their first dose of the Moderna vaccine, and 13,906 Nunavut miut are now fully vaccinated. And I always say these numbers are going up, and that's a good thing. This is fantastic news, but we need to keep those numbers climbing, get vaccinated, and if you want to protect yourself and those you love, that's what you'll do. Our government is committed to helping people to be able to complete their mandatory isolation and eliminate the spread of COVID-19. I'm pleased to announce that we have introduced a free Nunavut-wide isolation hamper support program. This is to provide 2 weeks of food and essential items to anyone on mandatory isolation. The hamper provides fruits, vegetables, dairy products, non-perishable goods, and bread. Country food is also provided when available. Modified isolation hampers are available to accommodate allergies and dietary restrictions, as well as discretionary add-on items. This program started on May 14 in Iqaluit, and as of yesterday, 116 hampers have been delivered. The hamper support program is offered to people in isolation when the Department of Health staff do their daily health check-ins. This program is available 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and do not call the COVID hotline to request for this hamper. This hamper will be offered when the health is doing their mandatory check-ins with you. Do not call the COVID hotline for this program. The COVID hotline is to deal with people that have COVID, who need testing, and who have questions about COVID. Nunavut miut, I'm excited to see the recovery counts and in the last few days, but I need to remind everyone this is not the end of COVID in Iqaluit or in our territory. We have a lot of work to do. This means that even though it's the weekend, there can be no parties or gathering. It means we stay apart to slow the spread of the virus. It means we take precautions and continue to follow the rules. Ati Nunavut miut, mask up when you're outside your home, stay home as much as possible, wash your hands often, keep strict physical distance with people outside of your household bubble, and get vaccinated. I'm proud of you all, and thank you all for continued efforts and patience. Stay kind and positive to one another. Do the right thing for yourself, your family, and everyone around you. Stay home and stay safe. And Nunavut have a nice, relaxing weekend. It's a long weekend. Thank you, Nunavut.
Blackwood. Beautiful Montreal Canadiens shirt. Yeah. Great game yesterday, but on with the real news, or other news. Ubdachiak, ubdukatchiakta. Kau ima yung tusangu lang nakatak to tamak kuninga ako sa ribaldeyak ta ilangin ni ako ni oka dulang manila taman na nubagjuang ni legener nunabumi amatagwani ikalung ni. Sanan na udjakon nirming mat sa kinaksunilo anero man nang neaktok tagwani ikalung ni takke nablugo napakani ngani ilablugo ako ni utigiyo tamani nubagjuang ni legelerapta taman na lupilariari yabut udjang naksuni atu tekatsiang mat ubluminasa uti ikalung ni udjang nakuti kandaktanga taman na atok tabut atu tekang malik malin nakuti udlo nungutu naksuni taman na nubagjuang naktagwan ni ikalung ni kisiya ni siyam ala yung makayarong mat siyam magpaldiak kandaron naksikaw tiginayang mat nalang ikupta udjak tutsiak tatok sanan naw niyang Iqaluit tidlugo tamakwa udjak toklabot kagdiyo loa kaya kang innereyabot matuak si maya kaya kang niyawagay kutini ato kaya kang ama nutakabot mikitu tamakwa udjak toklabot katiluak tayo lakulugin siya mahalayo manila taman na takulaw apta solo kang iklinarme tikirak juame sa nikiluang miyang maakbiyani taman na kayang yuti yung naktok aniguron na tiyaktok aksakoy nagluto tamatum nga pilare kaopta ikalumi teman at tawag taman na anigok ditun na tiyakta si anigok ditaw katak si mang matu kuyan na may tunagoti si magap si tamatum nga siya magtayli kunago taman na kayo si tiyato yung naglaw ani ako yun nang imatamatum nga nuwagjuan niyo yung good morning. As you can tell, it's a beautiful morning after a rough evening yesterday. I know that for some of you the messages may be a bit repetitive, but it's a beautiful sunny day here in Iqaluit, and we're about a month and a half into the lockdown in Iqaluit. And through your hard work, Iqaluit, your work is starting to pay off, and the proof in the numbers this morning show that. I encourage you to keep doing what you are being asked to do in terms of keeping your distance, masking up, and washing your hands. Those numbers could change very quickly if we give it an opportunity to. So please, let's listen to those rules even over the long weekend, and maybe more so. There's many, many more weekends to come, and we hope that we don't give it all up over this weekend. As you've seen in Rankin Inlet, Well Cove, Sanikiloa, Kanakvet, you've seen them pull through with hard work and following the public health measures. Iqaluit, you too can do this, and you too will do this if you keep on the track that you are, which is following very strictly the public health orders and the request, like the Premier said, follow these measures and keep safe and make responsible choices this weekend. Thank you very much for your hard work and sacrifice, and let's have a good long weekend. Payan na mi.
Good morning. It's been more than a month since the outbreak in Iqaluit began. Current situation shows that the public health measures in the city, travel restrictions to leave the city, and isolation for those who have left have been effective in preventing the spread of this virus to other communities. For those reasons, it is safe to ease restrictions in the Baffin region except for Iqaluit and Qinghai. Effective Monday, public health measures in the remaining Baffin communities will be the same as they are in Rankin Inlet, and please see the website for details.
Ulah sakut takhiyo nga tano simalek tu taman na sa mapalel lang ani suli Iqaluit ni. Manoyok kawi na simayo tako ane hamnang itulak ng mamalitaw ko yaw simayo tamani nunalipaw yak me. Aulak tayo litit sinang may sulit takbiw tutaw yu aulak tayo liga hamnang mo tambalo anit tayo liga hamnang mo tan. Iqaluit ni nga tulit tako ato tikat siya simaningin ni. Taman na siya makpala tayo litaw kulog asingin nunalin nun. Tamakko apit jutigil lugat tanakun niya ko tamakko kasuyaw balay kung nakningit isulit takbiw tutaw yu kikiktalom me. Agatuak Iqaluit ni kingak nilo. Pigarlo ni naggadjami tako ana hamnang itulak ng mamalitaw gali tako ng asingin ni nunalin ni kikiktalom me. Dahil mga chay na ulang nakto kangyak sinang metitut. Ako harisaw yak ko kaya kibiko to kasigabi me kawiga ako nakto si ilulingin ni.
Beginning Tuesday, schools, except for those in Iqaluit and Qinghait, will be allowed to open up more. Schools in Iqaluit will remain closed. Schools in Qinghait will stay at Stage 3 in the Department of Education's plan. Other Qikiqtani schools will implement Stage 2 of the Department of Education's action plan. Schools in Rankin will continue to be at Stage 2, and the remaining Kivalliq and Kitikmeot communities are at Stage 1. All Qikiqtani schools that move to Stage 2 will be given the flexibility needed to organize this transition.
Pigarlo ni naggadjaw la kimilin na bid agatuak Iqaluit ni kingak nilo matirun na lalaktuin. Ilin na be me Iqaluit ni suli matumalaktu. Ilin na be kingam ni suli nalunay kutangan ni matuya pala na mo 3 milaktu. Ana hamnang itulak ni kapangnaw tingi malituin. Asing ikikiktalom milin na bid atulak titsilaktu. Nalunay kutak tu mi matuya pala ng mo ilin na hamnang itulak ng mo kanuilik pala ng matuya pala ng mo pangnaw tingin ni. Ilin na be kangyak sinang may suli naluk kumatumingin ng nakto matuyak pala ng mo. Tako asilimang ikivalang may kitak may nilununalin ni suli matuyang agong nakto nalunay kutak 1 meter. Asilimang ikikitalo milin na be tako naluk kumatumi matuyak pala ng mo tako isumasaksi akong ng nakto pangnaw tsakakong nakluti tamat sa mga matuyak pala agong nanang mo.
I want to reinforce the importance of surveillance testing and controlling an outbreak. We use surveillance testing in areas where the risk of exposure to COVID-19 is higher than normal. Due to the incubation time of the virus and when people become infectious, surveillance testing may mean that some people are tested more than once. This focused and repeat testing allows us to identify infection early and prevent further spread of the virus. It is one of our better tools in containing an outbreak, which is why we thank all of those who have participated in this work. For those who wonder if you are screened for COVID-19 infection through the surveillance program, you will not be expected to isolate unless the test is positive. For those who are contacted at home, please participate, as the more people who participate, the more effective this surveillance program will be. Thank you.
Nalunay siya kan ni kumabunga pimakiuningin ni tamakko sa masimang ikala mga takaw isakta uhatak doon na awlat sinang mo tamatami nga sa maktaylitit sinang mo. Ato hatak tugo tamatumi nga kaw isakata ng may tamakko ulo kaya naktumigo tikak tuminiutuin na kailin nuvadyo anak 9 mi katisi yuminiutuin na kailin ni. Tako timimi ako ni timimi gundam ng nuvadyo anak amalo tamakko sa maktitsigum na ng mo taman na kaw isakata ng ilangit ataw makwakti yung atanulo ni kaw isakta uhatatuin na kaya hangata taman na tawaga haktok kawisain na kawisakan na katang nalunay siguman luta no badyo anak taas mayo na kilamiyo ko amalo siya maktaylitit sinang mo tamatuminga taman na kao nagpangovo awlat sinang mo siya maktaylitit sinang mo tayo may makuyan na may rumayak katamak ko angik si makatak to ilaw kataw katak to tamatumunga Tamakwa isimayunut kaya saktaw kaya kang mga tinuvadyanak to kang mga ata tamatumunga. Niriwiyaw dyan ito ni Teliga hamningin ni kisa ni nuvadyanak tak tuminiw pata ni Teliga kalikayang ata. Tamakwa kaya kaktaw simayo angik kami ni ilaw kataw katang nak kusi angik simat siyarlo si amisunik sa ilaw kataw tilog angik simat tilog itaman na ataw tikat siyanak sa gunangan. Yan na may.
Ken Driscoll, APTN National News. Dr. Patterson, you mentioned that on Monday the Iqaluit schools will be able to go to stage 3. Now, there's still a positive case in that community. Are you moving to stage 3 because you anticipate that case being resolved by Monday? And if not, what about Iqaluit? If we get down to a lower case count, is there a chance our schools could move to stage 3?
Ken Driscoll, APTN kuninro ta Patterson, King Amne, naluner sa kataka bitakwa. Ilinnerbi matuir palleagun nalalangata nalunay ko tanga 3 milo ni sulinova joanak to kakalawatillugo. Tamanili kaya kalunni tayo matsayin na tayo may laki ba?
Thanks, Kent. The important part of the question is whether or not the COVID cases appear to be isolated. In Iqaluit, it's been isolated since it arrived, the virus, I mean, and there's no evidence of spread within the community outside of people who were exposed initially.
Kuya na may pimariyo naksayo taman na nuvadyonak to ham mga naluner tao si maninga malo sa maktailit niya mga taman na nuvadyonak to ta ani kingam ni tayo sa mapalyan nga ni naluner tao si mangima tayo may adjiyong ito.
So it's safe to open up the schools in Iqaluit. In Iqaluit, we're still seeing transmission, occasionally getting into new houses, and some community transmission events. So it's not appropriate to open up the schools right now, but when we get to the point where most, if not all, cases are isolated, we'll consider opening the schools at that point.
Ulugan ak tumingin na tayo taka matuyak tayo nang nangikingam ni kasi nila kalun ni suli taman na siya mapalya mga nalaw na ni kung ano at jiging ito no ilumiw hati ito no nalaw na ni kung ino taman nalaw no nalin ni siya mapalya nga suli nalaw na tayo sa mga tayo may mata ko matuyak pala kung nang to ilin babe taman na pidyo tigil ko asingin ni nunalin ni.
Dr. Patterson, everyone's been mentioning the nice spring weather, and this is the time of year in Iqaluit where we usually see food trucks coming out. Now, out of all the sorts of food services you could have, food trucks would seem pretty safe. They're outdoors, you can socially distance. I'm wondering, how do the public health regulations here in Iqaluit apply to the food trucks here in town?
Luta Patterson upengangulik tilugo sila tiyang video katalir mitilugo tamakwa sila minunasi uti minikti watu nikita bigum nakatakto at tanaktot sa ngim mata dakwa kano matuyakon na lang mga ata malukis ni madligya kayang mga ata nalunari akong nakhe.
Thanks, Kent. It's been about 6 months since we had to think about that. They're the same as takeout. There's no there's no sit-down dining associated with them where different households will mingle. So they're considered the same as takeout and can open.
Kuya na may tako taki 6 taman na isa magigaya kalaw sa mga kuluya katawak tabag kasi ani tayo matchay na niribiti to tayo matikisay luti anit chivitsaw katakon ng ngata Ichibare at ugatillo niribid ni tayo matchay na matuyakon na lakto eh.
My question, or checking the case, CBC News, my question's for the Transportation Minister. flight to Sandy Iqaluit, that flight is a pilot project for travel to this community, but since travel is restricted to Iqaluit, are you going to consider how that's impacting the results?
Impacting the what?
The results?
Jackie CBC kunita na kayulari kuno minister na nuta hagata biyo katta kunalalang kata sanikilo amo ayong na kayang mga utsura utaw kay nang nga taman na kano nalo na rekan na kayo.
Kuya namig tas mga perigawin tako tanay la tunilawat tigot tako nga kangat taon na akito utaw roksuni kisiani Iqaluit matusimaningani tan pigya jang ito tan kisiani mapperpat pigya kon naksinakto kisiani tan kayu sitin nang naktabut tan novarnar jo tabanigun ni jumut pa Iqalunin. Thank you for the question. As this was a competitive RFP that went out for the Savikataaq pilot project, that has been awarded, but it's been delayed as the city has been in lockdown. Until the city is locked down, we won't be proceeding it, but we are still planning to continue that pilot project as soon as the city becomes available for airlines. Thank you.
And my next question is for the Education Minister. In communities that have had extended lockdowns like Iqaluit and Arviat, how has that impacted graduation rates?
Tako na nunalin na bimatuyo si makata trilugi Iqaluit niyak venilu tamakko piyari katakun nang nilin niyak tamini ano atokse si manikaka.
Oy namito tana pakutigabu takwa agani khimqul simalatini takwa isut pal liayut kupasini 12 mi suqqas luaqsimaqquli simangittu agani amalu kinguniagu tamakwa isut palliaqattaqtu naasautingi khimqquguttigu kisanittau taanna ofoserikkaniardullugu qai tamakwa exams qattariaqartut taanna isimatsaqsium niarmata taakwa titirarumarmangaatta upaluni titirarumarngimmangaata taanna qanertuurlutti ilisaayiminni angajoqqaaminnillu uqaatiqarunnarniartut kasusigumamanga. Thanks for the question. We've seen not very much fluctuations with the graduation rates in past years. It's continuing on as previous years. I do want to add to that for exams, just as previously in the last year, it's an opt-out, an opt-in. So students that are registered for doing exams, they have to indicate whether they want to proceed to writing the exams or not. But I encourage students to talk with their teachers as well as the parents and proceed whichever way they what's to the best of their situation.
Justin Patarnan at SEAC News. My question is for Dr. Patterson. Last Friday, you said that easing measures in the past, or in past outbreaks, have often looked at household spread, but in Iqaluit that may be different this time. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Justin Patarnan at SEAC Niluta Patterson ako talimang may kayuga bitamakwa kasuyaw ga kataan na ham nang itulagan ng mo malitaw gali sa mat laki gutagun nang katay kalun na jewin na kayuga biyo kanutaman na tukihaka.
I can't remember the details of what I said, but the difference in, there's a few differences in the Iqaluit outbreak than say, the avian outbreak, the biggest one being the vaccine, which we know protects the most vulnerable people, or protects everyone who gets it. It also slows the spread of the virus. And so that changes things dramatically. And we can see that, as I mentioned earlier, that we can see how that's changed the course of this outbreak compared to avian.
Iqamang ito kanilila kayong mga kasanita ko at jingin lakit at jingin nilaki kato ikaluni Arveanilo yung manita na ilang pidyo tigil lagu kapiyaw katak sa malang atatako sa pumiyaw gutiw naksamata miso naksano ang malusya ang maktay sinaksaw gunalang tamakwa miso naksay kapiyaw sa malak ningin no kasi ni taman nasa jak si maninga kawiyan ang lakito tamakwa miso naksay kapiyaw sa malak tiluga.
And so that means that it may be safer to ease measures a bit sooner for Iqaluit than it would have been 6 months ago because so many people have been vaccinated. Good.
Taman na to kilida mauluka nang itumin naksaw gayak to tamakwa kasuyaw wala lakataan na hanang itulaga ng mamalitaw gali takit pingasuyok tulaw ngatanik amiso naksay kapayaw sa malak nangin no.
But as the minister said, it's not yet the time to relax. I know it's a long weekend and the weather's great, but if we continue for a little while longer with concentrating on safe gatherings, small groups, wearing masks outdoors, that will go a long way to continue the current good news.
Kasi ni ministro hakka masuli tamak sa mga lugar hangata suli sa maktay sinang mamaligyak malitaw ya haktunik pinasa ko si ulunong ni kutango ni aktuni silat siya ngo ni aktumilo kasi ni tako suli malitaw ko ni aktav tamak ko sulo ami sulo tayo hataklotik matuwak sa makataklotik hanigi tayo hataklotila.
I was wondering if you could provide an update as to where the territory is in terms of position on vaccine passports.
Ako sa kaya kung nakita ko Nunavut may kanong tamakwa kapiyaw sa malaktilugi aw lahat tahat gutaw gunak sa gayak mga ata kapiyaw hatak sa mayoy.
From a public health point of view, or from my point of view, I think there's, I'm aware of a lot of discussions happening at some of the public health tables, at some other governmental groups that meet on a regular basis. I think certainly for international travel, they're going to happen. There's already countries requiring proof of vaccination on entry. And so the next question is, how can they be done in a way that does not lead to violations of privacy and confidentiality?
Tako ana hamnang itulang no pidjutigil tamani nunak jami khawsi khatalere nga tamakko khawsi khatak pallala kilangata sulaw la khatak mapata asingin nunaler joani kanata silatani taimagu nalunay ko tami kapiyaw simaningin nalunay ko ta khatak hak titsiling ngata ilangin taimale apariga khalaya khugo tamanna khano atulak tigum nam na mga tigo kikutoy na inusingin no kang unak tolere ng mulo abya ko takatay liluta.
Trevor Wright, Nunavut News. Did you guys have any results for the surveillance testing at residential buildings?
Trevor Wright, Nunavut News. Kung tako ale ilu miyo katigi kating ayo kaya saktaw hatalang alaw ngata kanokle.
Nothing yet that I'm aware of.
Suli aga.
Suli?
Suli.
Suli.
Did you guys get any more results from testing at the food, with regards to the situation of the food center?
Tayo nalikya nariyak tok biyo katak to soup kitchen.
Kayo, Davik?
Soup kitchen?
So the further testing of staff at the food center was negative. So we're continuing to work with them to minimize the risk of any spread among staff or clients.
Tēnei kana te kau I saktauloq tu naluna yaktauloq tu nuvat Joanak tu haunningi ma te koa pila khatigi ya vusuli tamakko seang makteile khullugi.
Minister Joanasie, please. Kent Driscoll, EPTN National News. Minister Joanasie, right now teachers here in Iqaluit, where they're doing the remote learning packages, are being told that they're expected to fill out a full report card for students, even ones who aren't returning the packages. I'm wondering, is your department considering any change to the report card assessment, considering that students have been living or working at home for a while now?
Kent Driscoll EPTN kun ilinerte tjegu halunne mana yo hau jausima mata takwa ilinerte khano ilinerte charsima mangata ilinerte charsima ngi mangata naluna yaruteni kama khoya mata tamakwa uterti tsikhatangi kalorti lugangi qamin ilinerte khano tamanna
khoyen nemitana iqati tsikkannerlunga khay suglutanna ilinnerna aqqaagunga matuinga ku taksi majugoro takko dinnerbit takko dinnertalornikumini sulikhawisartauner mata mannamu tikitsugu marutekko angiqauti angingami pileraga jawqtarpittau taimannattau khawisartau kannernermi matattau kisanittau udjerusukka migattattau suurlu takko matusimaartu tamani piluartumi khay khalunni akuniulukkut asinginnittau piviqartitaummi mataidinnerti suurlu ipinniani koloni ubaloni nammini ilinniaqamayang minni ubaloni nunaminnikkut ajiginnittuni tamakwa qanartuuqutitsauqattartu nammini ilinniaqut narniarmagittaakkualu inuusinginnitta atuuttaqarniarmata. Just to remind people that the schools for the most part of this school year have been open, and except for some exceptions, and all the course material that's been covered to date, those assessments will continue to take place and have taken place. For the situations, for example, here in Iqaluit, the school closures and the learning packages will be assessed and evaluated as per our plans. And I may also highlight too that the school closures has provided different opportunities for our students. We understand they're in different circumstances and different households have different situations, but it's an opportunity for students to reflect on and take on opportunities for personal growth, on gaining more empathy on different scenarios and looking at different land-based learning, for example. There's opportunities where they can build on their personal skills and develop, and that will be useful for their lifetime.
Minister Joanasie, the life skills and learning on the land aside, the teachers, when they put out the packages, were asked to focus on numbers and letters, numeracy and literacy, the basics. But they're being asked to grade these report cards full of subjects that they've barely taught, and even in the last semester have taught remotely. How can these report cards be any sort of meaningful guide for parents if they're being graded on such small amounts of material?
Minister Joanasie, takko ino silirinermu ilinnertitau ninginnitu saruminartuugaloa kisani ilinnertitsi toagakhauyau mata tamakko naasautilirinermu ukhalimaarunnanermu titerariussanermullu tamakko ilinnearlaungitsaartanginnitabbaneqqaagunni qanu taakko angiyoqqaariyaayuna toqtaugunnarngata.
Takwa ilisaydi suqlu qawlimaneqpaangummman matattau ilinnertaqtimini namimmangatta suqlu taanattau himeqqoqattanermilu suqlu naukkut namuk sipipallianermangatta linnernermini qanortuuqutigilunuuttau takwa ilisaydi uqattingit kisianittau tamakkua inaasauserineq titeqqerineq amaluhaning itiyang pidjutigin nakpake si madivuman nakut hangak kami pidjutitaw tilugi kisianitaw taan na kanaktong na medjavutaw sibunitinni ilisi madjavum atulugi. Just to build off the experience that we've had, and yes, we are focusing on and emphasizing literacy, numeracy, as well as the well-being of our students. This is where our teachers know the students the best, and this is where our education system has to meet the students where they're at, and we're asking the teachers to work with the students and ensure that they're putting their best foot forward in the circumstance, under the circumstances, and looking at how they will progress and proceed in their ongoing and continuing of learning. And this is something that we're grappling with, but also at the same time we'll continue to build on the experience that we've gained to date.
Jackie McKay, CBC News. My question's for Dr. Patterson. The surveillance testing of the apartment buildings, what are you looking for by testing apartment buildings? Are you looking specifically to see if there's transmission within those buildings?
Jackie McKay, CBC, kunitako ako isak pala na nakala ko bitako ng ilumio katigini katinga yun ilo Joani sumapidyo tigilugo sa maktumini usukit sigabi.
Yeah, there's a number of possible ways that there could be contact amongst people who live in the same apartment building, and we just want to ensure that we found any routes of spread.
Dako adjing ito ni sama biugon nang tatamaku katinga yun ilumio katigini apartment ngunaktaw yun tamakku kawi sa kaswal lakit kanito inaktaw.
I've had some questions from people worried that they could be catching COVID in apartment buildings on door handles or through air vents. Can you explain what that transmission would be?
Ako ay sumalo tsaka katang kata solo matoy ko tingano tay maser magbiutoy na katare hang katato katakangin ni kano taman na.
Transmission is much more likely to be from being in the same space for at least a few minutes. Transmission from door handles and glasses and inanimate objects like that we handle is actually very rare. It's less than 1 in 10,000 infections in this pandemic.
Tamakko sa mabiulari katang naksagun nakto solo katinga yumini utilugi 8 minutes kaya. Kasi ni tamakko mati tingin ni pedyo tigilago. Tay masa mabiungil naksa katakto 10,000 mi takun nang wal wataw sito atay matok si yumini sa makbiu gayak to.
Dustin Batar, Nunavut News. Do you have an update on the Pfizer vaccine?
Dustin Batar, Nunavut kun ni day nalagya Pfizer kaputi.
Yeah, we're hoping to have a supply some in territory sometime in the first half of June, but we don't know the exact date yet.
Tikibiu ko manakto wala tamaw na navon mo June pigala kataktilago. Kisa na kayo mangita ko sule.
Just following that, do you have an estimation of how many?
Hatsi.
We've asked for enough for all 2 doses for all children in Nunavut who are between 12 and 17.
Namat to ni makwa tikapiyaw hataw to kung nakayak to ni tipsirak samayo ukiulin ni 12 mix 17 mo.
Are there any plans for vaccine distribution in schools, either this school year or next school year?
Ilin na bin ni kapiyaw hatalang ng kapiyaw hatalang mga ata pang nas mabisi.
Not at this point, unless the schools in those communities that opt for like a larger mass vaccination clinic, the school gyms have been used. We could do that again, but those plans are still being finalized.
Agasuli tamakko ilina binni sulu tutsaran kata amisuni kapisi kata yumata sulu ilina bi pingwar bingin ni taman suli naluna taus mangit.
Trevor Wright, Nunavut News. At what point would we see public health measures be eased in Rankin Inlet?
Trevor Wright, Nunavut News kunne hanga kuta ko anna hamnang itulerin mo malitaw gali kangasin mi khasuyaw garun na lasibat.
So Rankin Inlet has increased risk of introduction, partly from Iqaluit, but also from Winnipeg, and we'd like to see those numbers in both areas improving before we ease their measures.
Kanyang sinong medyo ito kuta ko sa magbigun ng tatamang halun ni ngaktunig balo Winnipeg may ngaktunig. Tako amisulo kataro ni kata sa maksimaningi tako isimatsaksyo tigila tavon.
So would the restrictions also be dependent on the Winnipeg situation as well?
Winnipeg daw pidyo tigilugo tamako isumagayaw gayak kakasugayak daw lang mga ata.
Yes.
If Inuktitut lessons are done, Minister Joanasie, please.
Kusugak. Oh, Joanasie. Oh.
Kent Driscoll, APTN National News. Minister Joanasie, is your department tracking what percentage of the take-home packages are being returned to schools?
Kent Driscoll, tako pilari viseli na nilari yikut 80% tingi utak titaw katak mga ata ang kami ni ilina ko tayo utak titaw katak mga ata katsi.
Ilang itak ko ilina wait nasak simawad katak tut soglo utu tigidogi teko ilang ay katak tut ilina ko tiksamin ni tamani 72% mi take mo tikilugi lagi 96% mi ay katak tut ilina ko tingin ni kisanito tako utak tiwad la katak luti tako imaka ilang 35% mi tabunga 37% mo kisanito sulitako pidara jo wala mata ilina tino nalunang nimman. Yes, based on some data that some of our schools have collected, the pickup rates for learning packages range between 72 to 96%. And while the return rate for those same learning packages is at roughly 35 to 37%, but also keeping in mind that those are being worked on from what we gather. Thank you.
Minister Joanasie, you mentioned earlier meeting the students where they're at. Well, according to your previous answer there, where they're at is somewhere with 30% of packages being returned, and you're asking teachers to grade them on subjects that they even are teaching in the packages. So students will be getting report cards based on work they haven't done or work they haven't learned. How is that meeting the students where they are?
Minister Joanasie tako ilina ti pidyo tigilugi ko katakabi 30% tingi utak titsakatang imata ya minakalawangin nang kami ilina ko titsamin tako ilina titsayi kanu tako ilina tsak sa mga nalunak si gaya kakalawak tilugi pilirisi mangi kalawak tilugi ilina smagalawak tilugi suman.
Tayo may rao kakagawa masuklo ilinyang na akagong akagurima ilinyak tang mata tan na lasuli kaw di saktawin nakatang mata tan matu si mga kalawak tilugita ko ang kami ni ilinyak ko tiksay piliga ka jaw at ito kami ko jaw katang namin mata kasi ano ito tako ilisay yit tako ilinyak tako timin nito ukakatikaw na na yung mata suklo kano ilingang mga anamilang mga amaro sibumo ako tiginak tangin ni kanok to katigidluti ang ilok kangil ilawluti tana sul khimak pajawan ninang niak amaro kanok to taw niak to The when we say that teachers we're meeting the students where they're at and looking at what's been done to date and reinforcing what's already been learned and emphasizing the literacy, numeracy. Keep in mind the assessments have all throughout the year been taking place, and the material that's being covered at home. My staff and educators will be working with each student individually, and this is where continuous progress, where the individualized student support systems are geared towards the individual students, and those are looked at periodically and between grade levels. That's where this comes into play.
Jackie McKay, CBC News. My questions for the Premier. Can you let us know how the legislature is going to run next week?
Sebelum hanuta kamaligali te kate malakhan pinasawasiulak
I always wanted to say this is a speaker or John Quirk's question, but I can answer it. The legislature is going to start on May 27 as scheduled, and to the best of my knowledge, the most MLAs will be joining virtually. The 2 MLAs from Iqaluit will be here in person, and 2 other MLAs from out of Iqaluit will also be here in person. Tan kiu wakata kemera tan okak tiu kiu chartu no ayakta wolo batan John Course ki hen kiu lota ikpakago May 27 tan ikiwana ukwernelerman tabani katimaneler migapta mandigeliok tilukta par kailang itut tabani igdolo idoni minister lukta tabani net taiko tu mako maligaliok te kalung mi ta tabani net amma mako kanni maligaliok te kalung mi ta ngut tabani net. And I forgot to add in the English, all ministers will be here in person.
Thank you. Lots of people have been asking. My next question is for Dr. Patterson. We talked previously about public health catching up on transmission, and you said before they were several days behind. Can you update us on where public health is on catching up on chains of transmission?
There was, we had a period of time where trying to track that was completely useless because there was a large number of people who had shared exposures. So to be perfectly honest, I haven't kept up on that for at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Justin Pittard, Nunavut News. Does the current situation in Manitoba hospitals have any impact on medical travelers?
Justin Pittard, Manitoba,
Not that I'm aware of.
Aga.
The hamper program is now Nunavut-wide. I was wondering if you could just update us on how many people are isolating in Iqaluit and how many people, if you know, are isolating outside.
Tamanna Nunavut me sama pala ani pinjutigil lugo pilo akto mi katsi vai kalun ni ani taili titayo ama iluna tikatil lugi.
There's 196 people isolating in Iqaluit, and the majority of the people who are isolating in other communities we don't track, so I wouldn't be able to give an accurate number.
Mana yo 196 iqalun ni taili khuya simayo kisane asingin ni nuna ni khawi salo khatangin natigo khawi mangitakka.
Trevor at Nunavut News. I know it's only been a couple of days, but has there been any updates or anything to the mass clinic here in Iqaluit?
Trevor right Nunavut News kung ni tay kwami si khawi saktaw khatalaw tilugi tamane khalun ni khanoro.
No, nothing at this time. Aga.
Aga.
I'm gonna try to say this with a straight face, but a few people on the internet said there's magnets and vaccines. No, yes.
How do you say magnet? Oh, nipikarnak to ka kaputi.
Yeah, that's fake. That is misinformation about the vaccines. The Moderna and Pfizer, they're safe, they're effective, they are best protection against COVID-19, and the comments or stories about chips and metal that attracts magnet, they are not true in any way.
Tamakko sulingit siartui, tamakko tammarsimat siartui. Takwa Moderna kaputi te me tu tahangitu kisani takwa khawi nalunai tu narunak takatu te khat siar ningin sapo miya guti siar nak pangagunar ningin nulu novadja nak main te mo mi pikar nak tahangiti